Do you ever wake up in the morning and think, today, I think I'll eat like a king? No, a god. Well, if that's the case, then have I got the dish for you. Payasam, also known as kheer or payesh, is a rice pudding dish popular all over India today and has been a favorite of kings and gods alike. So working with the Taste of India Virtual Food Festival 2020, I'll put a link in the description below to where you can follow along, we're going to take a look at the mythic past of this fantastic dish, and I'll show you how to make it at home. This time on Tasting History. In the mid-12th century, King Someswara III ruled over the western Chalukya Empire, which covered much of southern India. By all accounts, Someswara was a lover of knowledge. In fact, one of his many titles was Sarvajña Bhupa, or the King Who Knows Everything, a phrase that also appears on my LinkedIn profile. But Someswara was not selfish with his knowledge of everything, so he decided to share it with the world via an encyclopedia finished in 1129 that he is credited as having written, called the Manasollasa. The Sanskrit roughly translates to delighter of the mind, and in its 100 chapters, it describes the entirety of royal life in medieval India. From astronomy to astrology, sports, rhetoric, music, dancing, architecture, religion, it even covers how to capture an elephant and treat it for numerous elephant diseases. But it's the third book that delights my mind because Someswara goes into wonderful detail about how to feed a king. And as it happens, he was king at the time. Funny how that turned out. One of the most interesting recipes is so well written that I think that you could recreate it exactly as he intends, even if you didn't want to. Fried black rat. Select a strong rat found in the fields and riverbanks. Fry it in hot oil, holding it by the tail till the hair is removed. After washing with hot water, cut open the stomach and cook the inner parts with sour mango and salt. Alternatively, skewer the rat and roast it over red-hot coals. When the rat is well cooked, sprinkle it with salt, cumin, and lentil flour. Mwah! Delicious, I'm sure, but I have decided to opt for one of the simpler recipes, if you could even call it that, for payasam. In the middle of the meal, the king should take well-cooked payasam made of rice, milk, sugar. So the Manasollasa gives us the main ingredients for payasam, but most of the other dishes include a lot of spices whenever given to the king. So because this is written in not so specific a format, I feel comfortable in adding a few spices to this dish as well. What I'm not going to be adding are the nuts and raisins that you'll commonly find in modern versions of payasam or kheer. Also, it doesn't give any instructions on how to make it, so I will be relying on the modern versions to mimic the medieval version today. For this recipe, you'll need a heaping half cup or 100 grams of small grain rice. It's really important that you find a small grain rice for this recipe. The one that I'm using is called kali jira. It's very, very fine, but really any small grain should work. 1 quart or 1 liter of whole milk, 150 grams or about 1 cup of grated jaggery, or 100 grams or a half cup of sugar. Now I'm going to be using jaggery for this recipe rather than white refined sugar. It's probably closer to the type of sugar that they would have used in medieval India and is still very popular in the part of India today where the recipe comes from. Now it's not an ingredient that most Westerners are going to be familiar with, but if you can find it, it is wonderful. It's just an unrefined version of sugar that comes in a hard cone usually that can be easily grated. But if you can't find it, white sugar will work just fine. Then the spices that I'm adding are 5 green cardamom pods ground up and 10 to 15 threads of saffron. So first, wash your rice and then soak it for 20 minutes in room temperature water. Then pour your milk into a pot and set it over medium heat. Once the milk is boiling, reduce the heat just a bit and add your drained rice in and stir. It's going to take that rice about 15 minutes to cook, but every couple minutes make sure to give it a nice stir so the rice doesn't sit on the bottom and burn. So while the rice cooks, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell while we delve into the epic history of Payasam. For all intents and purposes, Payasam is rice pudding. There are different variants throughout India, including kheer, payesh, firni, and they all have different consistencies, and sometimes they add in different ingredients, but overall, rice pudding. And rice pudding is not unique to India. In ancient Rome, they ate unsweetened rice pudding as a way to settle the stomach. And then, with the heavenly addition of sugar, the Byzantine emperors ate a spiced rice pudding with cherries called the food of angels. But their love of rice pudding, along with most of the rice that they got, came from the East. Now, there's little direct evidence, but most scholars believe that the ancient Persians were eating rice pudding as far back as 500 BC. But it was their Mughal descendants in the 16th century who introduced firni, a variation that usually includes ground rice for the pudding. But rice pudding was not new to India at the time because King Someswara had been making it 400 years earlier. And his might be the oldest recipe that we have for a rice pudding in India, because to go back any further, you only get mentions of kheer or payasam, and even then, typically in the realm of legend. But I don't mind going to that realm. Long ago, in the murky mythic past of India, the god Krishna decided he was low on rice. He turned himself into an old sage, he was always changing up his look, and went to the king who ruled the region around the Ambala Puja temple in modern-day Kerala, India. He challenged the king to a game of chaturanga, which was the ancestor of chess. And the king, being the strategist that he was, quickly agreed and said that he would give the old sage anything that he wanted if he were to win, because he wasn't going to win. Well, the old sage just said, I just want some rice. But I want to base the number of grains on the game that we're playing. Let's say 1 grain on the first square, 2 on the second, 4 on the third, 8 on the fourth, 16 on the fifth, and so on and so forth until they get to the 64th square. Well, the king was like, what a weird request, old man, but sure, why not? But he fell victim to one of the classic blunders. Never go against Krishna when rice is on the line. So they played the game, and shocker, the god won. Kinda seems a little unfair, but there it is. And Krishna demanded his reward. So not only was the king not as good at chaturanga as he thought, but clearly he also wasn't much of a math whiz, because the amount of rice that he now owed Lord Krishna was over 9 quintillion grains of rice, more than there are grains of sand on the earth. Well, lucky for him, Lord Krishna was reasonable and didn't want to ruin the poor guy, and so he said that he could pay the debt off over time, which was what happened and is still happening to this day. Even now, every day, rice in the form of payasam is served at the Ambala Puja temple, and Lord Guru Vayurappan is believed to visit every day to accept the offering. But while one temple in the south is burdened with the ancient debt of trillions of tons of rice paid via payasam, the dish's northern cousin, kheer, is actually said to have helped build a temple. The construction crew of the Konark Temple of Odisha was struggling to build the foundations of the temple because they were trying to build it on what essentially was swampland. But one day, the son of the architect looked down at his bowl of kheer and thought, I think I have a solution. So he took his bowl to the builders and dropped some rice balls in, building up a bit of a firm foundation, which I guess then translated into the same method to build the foundation of the temple. I find that story actually a little less credible than the one about Lord Krishna playing chaturanga, but, you know, it seems to work because the temple's still there today. Plus, the kid came up with a brand new version of kheer called gointa godi, which is still served in Odisha today. Anyway, whether it's kheer in the north, or payesh in Bengal, or payasam in the south, rice pudding still plays a vital role in many religious ceremonies to this day. But sometimes it's just a tasty treat. A tasty treat which I'm really looking forward to eating. So after about 15 minutes, your rice should be cooked, but go ahead and check it by taking a couple grains and trying to mash it with your fingers. It should mash very easily. Then add in your grated jaggery or your sugar and stir until combined. And then finally the cardamom and the saffron threads, and allow it to cook for about 5 more minutes while it thickens up just a bit. Then remove the pot from the heat and allow it to cool. Now, while it cools, it will thicken up a little bit more, but know that this is not going to be the same as Western rice pudding. It's just not as thick. In other parts of India, they do have much thicker rice puddings, but this variation is a little more liquid. Even though food preparation served in earthen vessels taste good, kings must be served in vessels made of gold. Now, while I really do appreciate King Someswara's suggestion that I serve this in a gold bowl, I'm not actually a king, so I don't have a gold bowl, but I do have one made of tin, I think, so that's what I'll be using. So here is my payasam. I can't wait to try this. It smells so good. The spice is there, but more it's just kind of a sweetness. So because I use the jaggery and the saffron, there is a little bit of a yellow tint to it. It can be made perfectly white as well. That color is called shwet in Sanskrit, and it's associated with divinity. So that's an option. But here we go with my off-white payasam. That's amazing. Oh, wow. So I'm eating it just above room temperature. It hadn't quite cooled all the way, but I actually think this would be really good cold. That's how I usually eat my rice pudding. This is amazing. The cardamom is there, the saffron is there, but they're mixed, so you can't pull out any specific flavor. And I think it's because of the jaggery. There's that certain je ne sais quoi. There's that flavor that you can't put your finger on. It's so aromatic. It's so much better. It's so much better than a Western rice pudding, I have to say. This is amazing. Whether you want it a little thicker or not, I don't know. I kind of like a thick rice pudding, but because the grains are so small, it still has that cohesiveness. It wouldn't work with a long grain rice. It just wouldn't. So there is that still kind of mushy quality that rice pudding has. That's amazing. This is my favorite thing that I've made on Tasting History. Hands down, favorite dish. As you can see, it's also a favorite of cats, Cersei. Though they seem to think that they're gods, so it makes sense. I was expecting to eat this over the course of a few days because it's quite a bit, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think I'm going to eat it all today. Yeah. So I really encourage you to make this one at home, whether you can find the jaggery and everything or not, but just make it at home however you possibly can, because it's wonderful and it's really quite simple and easy. Yeah, King Someswara, you have good taste, sir. I really appreciate you passing this down through the ages. Again, thank you to the Taste of India Virtual Food Festival 2020 for inspiring me to make this dish and helping me with some of the pronunciations. I hope that I didn't butcher them completely. But please make this dish and share it on Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag TastingHistory, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.